Is somebody from desk here? Can I know if the recording is on? Mm,
Yes, sir. It's showing recording has started.
okay, okay. Yeah, sure. Thanks. So, okay, so I will. Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for everybody who has joined here. And I will be starting with the. So, may I know if anybody from MRFP is also here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, okay. So, what is your like background of you guys? Have you like the are the have the Python classes started? What is the comfort level that you have in Python?
Yes, sir. Python classes have started. It's a combined class actually. Both IITM JRS and we are all in the same class.
Okay, 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 okay. So yeah, so you have some at least some knowledge about Python, right?
Yes,
What
sir.
I understand. Okay, fine. So yeah, so I'll share my screen and just let me know if it is visible.
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Give me a moment. So yeah, like I'm like this course we are offering for the first time. Just let me know if there are any technical issues related to voice or if the slides are not moving. And so yeah, this course we are offering for the first time, and I have
Sir,
yeah, yeah, sure, yeah, yes.
sir, lots of noise is picking up.
Lots of noise is picking up. Okay, just give me a minute.
Actually,
Yeah.
others can unmute themselves actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it fine now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So this is the first time we are offering this course, Climate Data Science. Now so we have a GitHub repository for this class, which you can go and see here. So we'll be posting the slides and the course materials here at the GitHub repository. I keep sharing stuff on climate data science at my Twitter profile, so you can go and see and follow and keep uh, for the updates on various aspects of technology and uh, what what is the latest uh, updates on climate and data science. So, can anybody share uh, their understanding on like do you guys must be knowing about artificial intelligence, right? So we are uh, we are seeing AI everywhere, from the emails you write to the cameras you have in your phones. There are various applications that basically AI is powering the devices of today, the algorithms, the data. Then general. So this one shows a general data science uh, problem statement, like how would you approach a data science problem. So you first have to define the problem statement, gather the data. Now gathering the data is not that challenging in at least climate data science, but yeah, some groups which must be doing work on instrumentation, there even gathering data is a challenge. So pre-processing, that is cleaning the data, analyzing it, and then making the models. You tune the model and you publish the model. So that's basically a pipeline for any data science project. So there are various things, aspects that make, or various skills that make a data scientist. So you can see one of them is software engineering, data engineering, data analysis, and doing research. So doing research on different algorithms, and what we are targeting in this course is basically applied data science to problems in earth system sciences or climate science. So that is the scope of this course. And so this one shows like where we, so what used to define a data scientist in the past, and how a data scientist, like if you want to call yourself as a data scientist, what are the skills that you need today. So we are focusing towards this applied scientist, the skills that are required for an applied scientist in this course. This is a typical pathway. So you start from one. Okay, so if you want to learn data science, so you like, it might look too much of a material, or like too many things that you need to do, but the ideal way of learning is to do projects and not worry about what you know and what you don't, and just keep doing things as and approach the problem as you get time, or depending upon your project. So you need to have the fundamentals in mathematics and basics, understanding tabular data, data frames, and different engineering. There is, so databases, so JSON, XML, no SQL. At some point of time, see, it might sound like just software engineers need these kind of skills, but you will realize that when you want to work professionally, or when you want things to scale up, you would need these tools. So then comes at the second step comes the statistics. So you just have to pick some data set, do descriptive statistics, histograms, probability based theorem, random variables. I hope you guys are already aware of the statistics. And then, so I consider machine learning to be a part of the statistics. And then, yeah, so with the statistics starts your programming. So with how you would basically analyze the data, you would need fundamentals in any programming language, but these days Python in general, because of the user base that Python has. So, and then comes the advanced. So at least uh, uh, then we have machine learning. There is a spectrum of different models. So then algorithms like k-means clustering, neural networks, regression, linear
Sir, your
regression,
voice is
logistic.
breaking.
Is it
Yes,
breaking?
yes,
Is,
Yeah,
sir. It's
sometimes
breaking.
your आवाज is breaking. Your sound is breaking.
okay, so is it breaking now?
No, no, it's
Now,
not breaking
now,
now.
Okay. Okay, fine. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah. So basically, so there is the whole world of natural language processing. So what natural language processing is basically how you would try to understand language. Okay. So the you guys must have seen, right, when you chat on these messaging apps or on Gmail these days, it started showing suggestions, and those are all basically deep neural networks at the backend at play, which is leading to or which is giving you some kind of suggestion. Those are all recommendation system algorithms. And then comes the visualization part. So there are you can So there are different tools and there are different types of visualization that you can do. So Tableau is a very important and very good tool to learn if you want to go for data visualization. Simple data visualization, I think you will learn in Python course using Matplotlib. And then so there are different tools to handle the big data. Now this doesn't include our those of you who are familiar with our climate data, so handling big netcdf files and stuff. So this doesn't include that. I mean it. So those kind of data sets are also part of the big data framework. And then doing IO and different things with the data. So the like just this one shows the data science landscape. So what all do you need for data science? Now Kaggle is a very important aspect of the whole data science ecosystem. Now if you guys want to learn data science on your own, the best way is to learn on your own. But yeah, these kind of courses can help. uh, Kaggle is the place to go to. Okay, so you can pick up any competition, or you can pick a competition of your whatever is if it is it's linked to your project or your field. So you'll get a lot of learning from Kaggle. And it's easy to get scared from it, but there is Kaggle learning. There are discussion forums, there are open notebooks, lots of things, lots of resources are there. And so then comes so what are the different types of machine learning? So one is supervised learning and we have unsupervised learning. So supervised learning is basically when you have a labeled data set. Okay, so you have images, let's say, of cats and dogs, and they have been labeled. Cats have been labeled as 0, dogs have been labeled as 1. So that's an example of a classification problem. Or you can have a labeled data set with in which your target is a regression problem. So regression problem can be that if you are having some tabular data set, let's say that on the housing prices, and you know the area of the house, or the what is the parking inside, what is the area of the house, how much parking is available, how much of built up area is there. So we're using different predictors. You can basically do the regression problem. Now comes the field which doesn't have a labeled data set. It's called unsupervised learning. And so unsupervised learning has algorithms such as clustering. Now clustering is basically if I just give you some data and I ask you to find out clusters in the data set. So that's basically clustering. So you can see I think it's very small, but yeah, I mean, if you very carefully look at the at the image below clustering, and you can do dimension reduction. That's also an aspect. So principal component analysis is a very popular algorithm for doing unsupervised learning using dimension reduction. And then there is association. So yeah, like this is also showing a pipeline for data science project. What you would do from end to end, from uh, getting the data to the deployment. So now you must be thinking how deployment is important in our field. So these days there are cloud-based platforms like Google Earth Engine, Microsoft Planetary Computer, on which you can basically deploy live models. You can deploy your model, which will query the data, let's say some weather data or atmospheric sciences data. And then it can do some kind of prediction, and then it can even visualize over the map. So Google Earth Engine has got a TensorFlow API, which using which you can do the deployment. Then so what is the so these two terms have become very popular: machine learning and deep learning. What's the difference? So in machine learning, you basically, you start from an input, you have some data. Then like around 10 to 15 years ago, when we didn't have or people didn't know much about deep learning or its how good it is. So they would do something known as feature extraction. So feature extraction is basically finding out good predictors in the data. Then you have a very simplistic type of algorithm. Maybe you can call it simplistic, such as linear regression or multivariate regression, or you can have something like support vector machine, random forest. You can do classification or regression, and then you have a target. So for example, whether this is a car or not. So so you will try to find out the features in the image now. But in deep learning you don't need to do feature extraction on your own. So it is assumed that the model itself does the part of feature extraction. So that is basically pre-processing, and it takes a lot of burden from the person who is developing the model. So that's how we were able to scale. So deep learning has become so popular because of this one aspect that it provides. So these are the list of different skills that a data science person should have. So Python comes on top, and these are the, so you can see the different libraries. So the thing is, doing data science, so if you want to these days, if you want to do some kind of applied work, or even if you are working on fundamental or basic research on developing deep learning or data science based algorithms, people don't start from scratch. So it's like, if you guys have heard of BLAS or LAPACK. So these were old, and these are some libraries which are used to do linear algebra. Okay, so these libraries are still being used in our forecasting models in a lot of places, but people don't rewrite if you want to do some kind of matrix multiplication, or uh, the basic frameworks are what is reused. So for data science, we have frameworks such as TensorFlow, PyTorch, Keras, FastAI, which are very, like, which are the foundation of what is done in any data science project today. So then there are apart from these frameworks, there are different software engineering tools you need to know. So some knowledge about GitHub, and then running Jupyter notebooks, Python, opening the some opening files on a Linux machine. So knowing about Vim, then you can, so you like after, so the data science framework, like the ecosystem has developed so much that now there are frameworks such as weights and biases, and there is another framework called Hugging Face, if you guys must have heard of. So you can just monitor your models in a very efficient manner using weights and biases and Hugging Face library. So there are, so these are the different things. And then what are the hardware or like specific stuff. So if you want to train large models with huge amount of data, deep, like we say the model is deep. I'll come to details. I'm just trying to give an overview of the course. If you guys have any question, just let me know. Okay, uh, please feel free to stop me anytime and ask for questions. So the learning, it happens on the GPUs, but there are there are avenues for doing the prediction directly on the edge or the devices. So these are the different aspects. And yeah, so you would need to do data analysis, know some math, should know how to deploy. If you are extracting the data sets, doing some. So I have seen, like, even in our field, there sometimes there is some crappy website which hosts the data, and you, if you know some basic web scraping, helps a lot. So what the ID? So you just select one ID. So Google Colab is is a very popular IDE these days. So we'll be doing the this course in Google Colab. And data visualization is very important. Choosing the programming language. So Python and R were going parallelly until some years, but now Python is clearly at an advantage as compared to R. Okay. So then uh, yeah, so then we have this one shows on x-axis the years and on y-axis the teraflops. So basically how much of training compute is required. So flops is floating point operations per second. And if you see around 2009 or 2010, this data set was there, MNIST. Okay, so this is I think the handwritten digit recognition data set. So you have images of numbers from 0 to 9, and those are labeled as, so if the 0 is labeled as 0, so the image, you have the image 0 and the number 0. So this data set was like the hello world of machine learning or deep learning around that time. And so it used to take around 10 to the power 14 floating point operations per second to reach reasonable accuracy on MNIST dataset. After that, so and that basically led to the success on MNIST, led to the growth and I would say the explosion of deep learning. And the models kept on evolving, and even the new data sets started coming. So we have these days so reached up to like around 10 or 24 flops, which is like of the order of around 10 to the power 9 teraflops, which is huge. So this requires, so training a Megatron, which is, so Google basically uses last time I was reading it uses the BERT algorithm for, so if you are typing something on Google, the suggestions it gives you or the search queries it shows, so it uses the BERT model, which came somewhere around 2017, 2018, and it definitely uses more than 1 petaflop of compute. So this requires, training these models requires large number of GPUs and lots of storage space. So NLP models don't require that much, but what I would say is that what people consider as big data in the computer science community, they don't have like, so our community, the climate science community, the kind of data that we have is much larger or huge or massive as compared to the big data that they are talking about. So we have huge amounts of data. And these so in this course we'll be using Colab. And Colab comes, so it's free to use. It comes with uh, Tesla P100 GPU, which is having 16 GB GPU RAM. So then, like, you can use that, and we'll try to make sure that the problems that we do in this course, they are easily being trained, and the inference is being done using the GPUs available on Colab. Then there is this terminology which is becoming very famous these days. It's called ML Ops. So it's basically end-to-end machine learning. So the design of the problem, model development, and then operation. So model deployment, model monitoring. So there is a full specialization on Coursera on ML Ops. You can go back and see. Then there are these three platforms which are typically used for doing almost like more than almost all, or maybe more than 90-95% of deep learning these days. So one is Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. So Colab is something which is from Google. So we'll be using Colab, but you should be aware of these different frameworks. It's the basic versions or the trial versions are free, so you can, just like Google Colab, there is an Azure ML platform from AWS. There is Athena, so you can go ahead, and they have tutorials and courses free of cost, so you can just go and learn these different platforms. It's it helps a lot for doing different types of uh, data science if you're stuck somewhere or in the different process. So then, yeah, this is, I'll just skip this slide. So machine learning lifecycle with Amazon Web Services. Then there are different databases. So you need to make a choice on what kind of database to choose from. So predominantly there is SQL and NoSQL. So SQL is used for structured data, and NoSQL for like data set which is semi-structured or not structured. So we have different frameworks for that. So for SQL we have MySQL, PostgreSQL, and for NoSQL there, so something like MongoDB is very famous these days. Now, if you like, I believe that a lot of you or most of you have had some experience with linear regression in the past, in high school or in your bachelor degrees. So we'll very quickly move through the basic algorithms. So the I like to say that the neural networks are, so linear regression, so simple linear regression is the most simplest type of a neural network in which you are like you are just having one variable as an input, one variable as a target. So there is an independent variable x, there is a dependent variable y, and then so you do various things like you pre-process the data, normalize it, and so these are our data points, and our target is to fit a straight line to the data. So what we are trying to find out is are the values of b naught and b1. So we initially assume some values b naught b1, and then so this is the model b naught plus b1 x1, and then you have some ground truth values. So you will calculate the yi minus yp. So yi is the are the actual values of y. Yp are the predicted values of y. For example, initially you assume some random values of b naught and b1, and then you compute the square of the error, sum it over, and our target is to minimize this error, and that's how we'll get the value. So you can try various values of b naught and b1, and you can develop this linear model. Then comes the multiple linear regression. In multiple linear regression, you have the different inputs x1, x2 up to xn, and you have a target variable y. So in a similar manner, we compute the loss function and try to minimize the loss function uh, for the multiple linear regression. Then comes logistic regression. So logistic regression is basically it is you can consider it as regression, but it is, if you're trying to do a classification problem, if you're having classification problem, for example, if you want to segregate your output into binary outcome as 0 or 1. So what you would typically do is, so for the output y, so or here if you call it z, you would compute what is known as sigmoid function. So sigmoid is nothing but 1 upon 1 plus e to the power of minus c. And if you compute this sigmoid, you can say that, for example, if the sigmoid is greater than zero point 0.5, then we can say that the classification is 1 if it is less than zero point 0.5. So those kind of things are learned by the model. So you can do logistic regression for the classification problems. Then we have a decision tree. So decision tree is also a type of uh, yeah. So the decision tree is basically a supervised learning algorithm in which you would basically have, let's say, some number of variables, right? So different variables, just like a multiple linear regression problem, or even a single variable, but then the tree would be smaller. So if you are having the different or single variable, so let's say x you have, and then you test it on different conditions. So let's say, if you say x is greater than or equal to something, yes, So it goes on the left, no, it goes on the right. And then you put another condition: if x is less than 73, if x is greater than some other number, then you go to the left or right. So like this, you basically make some kind of rules. So so as to do classification or regression. If you are if your end result is, for example, a yes or no question or a 0 or 1, then it the decision tree would output the tree as well. So it's there is some kind of explainability that is there with the decision tree algorithm. So you can see how your model is training, or what is it, what is it that it is learning. And then there are some metrics that are very important to know. So one of them is entropy. Now entropy is so you have the distribution. So if you have a variable v, so you can basically discretize this as a distribution. So you can say the distribution of the distribution of v multiplied by the log of distribution of v. If you sum it over all the v, then this gives you the entropy. And so I have a function for entropy. It's sometimes it's difficult for some people to understand without seeing the distributions. So there are methods to even calculate the number of bins for estimating the entropy. And then there is a metric called as information gain. So these are some important metrics which would be used in the whole data science, like if you are working on using data science for your problems. So then yeah, this is a cheat sheet showing the regression analysis. So basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to fit a function f to the data points xi. So xi can be x1, x2, x3 up to xn, any number of I. So in linear regression, what you do is you minimize the error. So yi minus y predicted. So y predicted is f of x, and then you sum over it, minimize the loss. Then we have a polynomial linear regression. So the model is something like this: f of x I equal to beta naught plus beta 1 x I, x1 plus beta 2 x2 square. Okay, so in this case, like the way they are showing is the different independent variables are basically xi square, xi cube up to xi raised to r k. And then you would do yi minus y predicted, which is f of x. And then we have the something known as Bayesian regression. So in Bayesian regression, what you would do is you would fit a normal or a Gaussian distribution over the data. So you would find out the different parameters of that distribution. And then once you do that, so you estimate the values also over. So estimate for different x for what are the corresponding values of y. And then we do the similar thing. We find out the error y ground truth minus the estimated values, square it up, sum it over all the data points to minimize this error function. And then there are different types of regression called like which are called as ridge regression, lasso regression. In ridge regression, apart from just the loss function, what we have is a summation of all the weights. So for example, in a linear regression, what your weights are b naught, beta naught, and beta 1. So you would also sum up the weights. So this is basically used when if you have a lot of large number of variables. And to basically prevent overfitting, this technique is also known as regularization. And then you can do it in another way. So you can take the absolute values of the weights or betas, and if you modify your loss function in that way, it's called a lasso regression. Now if you want to do classification, so you do a similar thing. So you just take 1 upon 1 plus e to the power of minus t, where t is your the final f of x. So you can consider f of x as t, and then you compute sigmoid over it, and then define your classification. Uh, so the model will basically learn it, and that is basically called as logistic regression. Then what are so is anyway so is everybody like with me, or do you guys want to discuss more on regression or linear regression?
Sir,
Yeah.
I want to ask related to regressions that whatever those points are there plotted, those scatter plots, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
in the linear regression in polynomial, those scatter
Hmm.
points are so according to the scattered nature,
Yeah.
are we going to use that regression type?
Yeah, so that depends upon you. So see, the thing is now, if you are having a if you are having this kind of a data which looks like it doesn't look like
Linear.
having a linear, yeah, it doesn't look like linear. So if you are fitting a linear model on it, your error would be high. So see, you can visualize this data like this is just for the illustration purposes, but in real world you will be having, let's say, 10 variables. You cannot visualize that, right? You can only find out the metric, you can only find out whether your model is performing good or bad. If you're having just two variables, x and y, it's easy to visualize it this way. And definitely you can see, and you can try to fit a curve to it. Yeah, please go ahead. But I would say that in a more realistic scenario, you don't have a univariate precursor set. Okay, so it's difficult to visualize also. I mean, this is just shown for that. What you would typically do is just compute the metric. The metric would be very bad in this. So the error term, it would be higher in this. We can see, and it would be much lower in this kind of a polynomial regression. Okay.
So first we have to analyze the data that how it is going to
Yeah,
scatter.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So when I was talking about the whole pipeline of any data science project, so you, yeah, here this is that is not shown, but yeah. So you see, you like analysis, or it's also called as exploratory data analysis. That you should always do. You should see what's there in your data, uh, and whether how it looks like, whether linear model would be good for that, or a more complex model. So there is something known as Occam's razor, which says that it is always preferable or advisable to use the most simplest model possible. You should not try to go to a complex model. So if your problem can be solved with a linear model, and you are trying to do it with some kind of sophisticated deep learning, you are basically doing overkill. You are wasting the computational resources, your time, lots of just it might hype it up, but then, like, in a lot of cases that is not required. So yeah, you should always analyze your data and see how it looks like. Gives a lot of idea on what to do with that data, what model to use, and stuff like that. Okay.
Sir, one more question that whenever we are training those models, we need a huge data, right? So if there is a more and more data, the training will be more better.
See, that depends upon. Now, what I would say is that it's not a rule, or see, there is no such fixed guideline as such. Okay, for how much data is required. Some models can be good models can be built with just 100 data points, and once you have scaled up, even adding more data, or you have generalized, your model is generalized, even adding more data won't make much of a difference. But that depends upon from problem to problem. You have to do it and see. There is no such fixed answer to that question.
So is there any classification that this kind of method works for few number of data sets, and this kind of method works for the more number of data sets.
So
Suppose
yeah,
we have we have
if you
some.
have yeah yeah so yeah so if you have, let's say, less number of data sets, for example, if you have a maybe not less number of data sets but a sparse data problem, like for example you are trying to predict lightning. Okay, now lightning doesn't happen every day, right? So if you put an instrument outside IITM and you start measuring lightning, it won't happen every day. You have, for example, maybe where you will have some very few number of days when, or the times when this event has happened. So different methods are used, like people, what they do is they would train the model for not many number of epochs. So the training would be for few epochs so that the model doesn't overfit. So there are different methodologies to handle different types of if you have a data imbalance problem, if you are having if you are having less data, like that's all you have, like you can't do much about it. So and you can plot it, you can do, yeah, you were asking another question, right?
Yes, sir. Like in our research work, suppose mostly we face the problems related to the data, that if
Yeah,
data is limited or it is not continuous. So at such point, if we want to apply this kind of method, then there should be some algorithms also that work with those few number of datas, or the.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah. Yeah. So
So
yeah.
I just want to know that which are those methods actually,
See, there are
that.
there are some, yeah, okay. So there are some very specific algorithms which can do your gap filling, okay, and then you can artificially fill the gaps. So people traditionally, people, what they used to do was they would fill the gaps with something like average or median, but that's not an intelligent way to go about it, right? So
Yes, sir.
now there are basically efficient ways to do that. I can I can show you one paper. Okay, so yeah, so this paper came in Nature Scientific Reports, and the thing is, this is this method. It seems to me is so good they have not released the code. Maybe they are trying to patent it or something, or they're trying to keep it to themselves. But you can read this paper. So what they basically try to do is they try to use an algorithm called, I think, a form of UNet for convolution neural networks, which basically does the gap filling in the data. So yeah, so they what they do is they artificially, so you see, for irregularly and regularly missing data reconstruction. So they develop some kind of synthetic data sets, like you have this on x-axis is okay, so on x-axis is distance, y-axis is depth, and they have plotted the velocity here. So they would what they would do is they would do some kind of thing such that at equal intervals, or at regularly, or at proper uh, distance, the data is missing. Or I think this is an example of irregularly missing data, and then they would have this as an input, this as a target. So your model is trying to create something that it doesn't even know. Okay, like that's like fortune telling. I mean, it doesn't know what is inside, but we are forcing it to learn that. Okay, I mean, it's we don't know whether it is learning science or what is it doing. I mean, there those arguments are different. Like people talk about explainable AI, but yeah, there are algorithms which can help you to do gap filling of spatial data sets, and even do gap filling of time series. So you can do that. There are, yeah, but those are like specific algorithms, we can touch those algorithms in this course if you like. Yeah, so that's all I have to say about it. Does that answer or maybe create more questions than what you?
Yes, uh, yes, sir. It is
Yeah.
clear now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So anybody else has any question, or shall we go move ahead?
I
What
have a
is
question.
yeah, right. Yeah.
One you have showed now, is it applicable to all type of variables? Like we
Can you be a bit louder?
is the one you have showed now,
Okay.
this
Yeah.
paper. So is it applicable to all type of variables which have
Yeah.
a
Yeah. See. This algorithm is a general purpose algorithm. Okay.
okay? Huh.
So you can use it on anything. It's not restricted to any. They are like they are talking about a general purpose algorithm where you can fill the gaps in your data. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So okay. I if there is no question, like you guys can feel free to ask anything at any point of time. Okay, so I will quickly move to yeah. So what are neural networks? So we have seen that that in linear regression, your model is basically y is equal to something like mx plus c. In a neural network, so as I was saying, linear regression is the most simplest type of neural network. In a neural network, you do w1 x1 w2 x2 plus w3 x3 plus w4 x4 or wn xn, and you do the linear combination or you sum all of them up, and you also add a bias term, so it's like y is equal to mx plus c is your bias term. And then after summing it up, what you do is you apply an activation function on the on sigma of wixi plus bias. So this is what introduces non-linearity in your model, and there are different activation functions that we'll talk about. So which are like sigmoid or tan of x, tan hx. So then the algorithm which is used to do to minimize the loss in the in your neural network. So very basic type of algorithm, or which is most popular, is known as backpropagation. Now in backpropagation, so let's say you have a set of inputs x1 to x5, you have a set of targets y1 to y4, and so what you would do is, so you would compute net. Okay, so net is basically x into w. So x into w is, so for you are computing, so you have to define the number of hidden layers. uh, Number of hidden layers, so your number of hidden layers in this one are 3, and then each hidden layer will have a set of different number of nodes. So you have you for each corresponding line you have a w, and then you multiply that w with the corresponding x. So w1 1 into x1, w1 to 1 into x2, you compute this net, and then just sum it up for this one, and then you compute the activation. So activation you compute as sigmoid of net 1. Then after computing activation, you have this number, and then you do the same thing further. You keep moving ahead, so each of these arrows will correspond to a weight. You do linear combination, linearly sum them up, and then apply the activation function, reach here. So like that you can reach to your final target. This is like depending upon your problem. Let's say in this case you had 4 classes, or you want to predict 4 numbers in case of regression. So at the end you will have something like this. So your model will be predicting something. So let's say after you have done all these computations, you will get some y1 or y1 hat, and then you know the actual value of this y, right? So the ground truth. So you will compute the error, you will square them up, and then you sum the error. So after computing the error, so which is e, what you can do is you can compute the derivative of the error with respect to the different computed terms. So let's say the net 3 is the final layer activation term. So you compute del E by del of net 3, and then which is net 3 minus y. So this will be basically, if you differentiate this error, del of error divided by del of net 3, it will be 2 into this term into 1. So this will be, yeah, so 2 into this one into, yeah, I think it should have a term 2 in it, but yeah, anyways, yeah. So then you further compute the derivative with respect to the different terms. So you will find out, using the partial differentiation, you will find out the different terms. So basically this is del of E divided by del of net 3 is basically, if you change unit 1 in del of net 2 or net 3, how much will the error change? So then those terms, so if you compute all those terms, then you can basically update the weights. So if you find out del of E by del of W1, del of E by del of W2, so del of E by del of W1 is, if you are changing slightly in W, how much error will change? So basically, what is the contribution of W1 to the error? And we multiply it with a number which is alpha. We call it as the learning rate. So so alpha is basically how much you would want to learn from this del of E by del of W1. So basically, whether you want rapid learning or you want a slow learning, so that you can choose different values of alpha. People typically choose from 10 to the minus 5 to 10 to the minus 3 or zero point 0.1, something like that. And yeah, so this is a typical architecture of a deep neural network. So on, you can see this is the depth. So in this one, it is having one input which is blue, one output or target which is yellow, and it has 1 2 3 4 5 6 hidden layers. And the width of the this neural network is, uh, in this one, all the hidden layers have the same number of neurons. So it is how many neurons you have per layer. And then comes, so this plot shows, so on y-axis you have your error or you have your cost, and on x-axis is your, for example, your model complexity. Or you can also, so people would plot the number of epochs. So if it is in this regime, like on the left of the dotted green line, we can say that the model is underfitting. If it is on the right side, it's said to be overfitting. We would want to reach some kind of a point which is at the intersection of this blue curve and the dotted green line. So which is the optimal, like, sweet spot, which is something we would like to reach. And yeah, so this one shows from, so also there is a very nice course. It's called Intro to Deep Learning. The whole course is from MIT, available at intro2deeplearning.com. So this slide is from there, explaining what a perceptron is. So perceptron is basically this this piece of mathematical operation which forms as a basic structure of your neural networks. So you have the different inputs, x1, x2, xm. You have the weights, you sum them up, apply the nonlinear activation, find out the predicted value. So then we have the different activation functions. Sigmoid is 1 upon 1 plus e to the minus z. You have the hyperbolic tangent, which is this one. And then you have ReLU. Okay, so it's called, the full form is rectified linear unit. So this activation function is max of, so g of z is equal to max of 0 comma z. So when deep learning started becoming popular, people used to use sigma.
Sir, you're not audible. Not audible at all.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, it's not audible actually. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Manmit ji.
He is not
Yeah,
audible.
just,
Am I audible?
yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry for this technical issue. Yeah. So I have shared my. Yeah. So I was talking about the activation functions. I hope this is where I was when it got cut off.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So there are so in the like in 2010 or something somewhere around 2010, sigmoid was the most popular activation function, and then came hyperbolic tan, and then rectified linear unit. So rectified linear unit or ReLU is basically max of 0 comma z, and so the basic purpose of any activation function is to introduce non-linearities into the network. And by introducing non-linearity, so you can see that in this case your green is a particular class. So let's say it belongs to class A, and your red belongs to class B. If you try to segregate this data using a linear function, you would introduce a lot of error in your model. So what a typical model would be something which accurately segregates these two classes, class A and class B, which would be a nonlinear function. So that's what nonlinear activations do for us. And so until now, what we have seen is our deep neural networks over over scalars or vectors. We can also have this kind of a deep neural network over images or over 2D matrices. They are known as convolutional neural networks. So in convolution neural networks, you have the 2D input. You can have a scalar output or even a 2D output, depends on the architecture. And then in the deep in the simple plane, this neural networks, the weights that we were having were scalar. So but in this case, in convolution neural network, the weights would also be 2D matrices. So we would do different operations. So we would convolve the weight over the input, which is known as convolution operation. And there is something called as pooling, fully connected layer. So we'll discuss this in detail. And yeah, so this is what happens at the time of convolution. So if you have an input, so let's say your input is so the this is your input image having of the size 3 by 3. So and if your filter is of the size 2 by 2, then if it is 2 by 2, then you would basically do a convolution. So you would typically keep the kernel or the weight matrix over the uh, over the original matrix. So you would say 1 into 1 plus 2 into 2 plus 3 into 2 plus 2 into 1. So that becomes 1 plus 4 plus, so 1 plus 4 is 5, 5 plus 6 is 11, 11 plus 2 is 13. So this would be your first output. So then what you would do is you would take one stride. So this is known as a stride. So you would move your filter one step ahead, and then you would do the same operation. So you would multiply this matrix with the weight, and you would get another number. Then you would take a downward stride, and then you would get another number, and then another convolution operation. And these convolution operations, if you see, this is just a linear operation. You can apply nonlinear activation function to this, and like keep on doing this, and you would have your convolution neural network. So there is also a concept of padding. So people do padding. So you can see that your input image was of the size 3 by 3, but the output is of size 2 by 2. So what is the way to calculate the size of output is basically you say uh, size of for particular edge. So if the size is 3 minus the edge of the filter 2, so 3 minus 2 plus 1. So if you are not doing any kind of special operation, but you might want to keep your size of input and output as same. So what people would do is they would pad, they would do introduce some numbers around the original input image, and we call that as padding. So if you do, so this is with padding 0, this is with padding 1. If you do the padding and then if you do a stride of 1, so you would find the input and output image size to be same. So this is what I was talking about. If you can use stride as 1. So if you use stride as 1, your filter will move one step in the x and the y direction. Or if you are using a 3D, you can even use a 3D image in the z direction. If you are using stride as 2, then your filter will move 2 steps in all the dimensions. So then there are different types of famous convolution neural networks. So AlexNet was what became the state of the art in 2012. It was very popular, and it solved the ImageNet challenge, which is in which there are lot of different classes, and you are given images and you have to tell whether this is a shirt or this is a shoe or this is uh, spectacles. So it's basically the ImageNet data was constructed, and then this ImageNet challenge started. So AlexNet, and then there was VGGNet. So VGGNet comes in two versions, VGG16 and VGG19. So VGG16 has 16 layers, VGG19 has 19 layers. And then in 2015 came the ResNet. So a ResNet is basically having a model which has skip collections, or what we call as residual. It's having a residual. It's a residual network. So let's say you have the layer, which is shown in light green, and another layer which is shown in yellow. So you would basically, you would compute sequentially, but you would also do something like, at the time of computation after the yellow weight layer, you would bring the data directly from which was coming before the green layer. So you would skip it, and you would also do an f of x plus x. So that's the basic ResNet block. So ResNets, people found that in improve the accuracies of CNNs. Like, people were trying different things, but then ResNets performed very well. And then we have something known as InceptionNet. So InceptionNet came in 2014. What you do in InceptionNet is, so you can do a one cross one convolution. You can have a filter of size one cross one. You can do a one cross one convolution and then a two cross two convolution. So you can change the size of the filters in the same layer only, and then sum it up in the before the next layer. So that is your building block of the inception network. This is known as the inception block. And this shows a complete chart of the neural networks. So you have a perceptron, then we have a feed forward network, which is basically, we also call it multilinear perceptron, or multi-layer perceptron, which is am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Hello.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So a multi-layer perceptron, which is having a three-layer neural network with one hidden layer, and then you have radial basis function. You can also have a deep feed-forward network. So basically, the difference between a simple neural network and a deep neural network is, if you are having more than one hidden layer, you call it as a deep neural network. And if you are using a neural network with more than one hidden layer, so basically you are having total number of layers is 4. That is called, if you train that network, that is known as deep learning. So then you can have recurrent neural networks. So the input of the layer feeds into itself. This is used for time series forecasting, recurrent neural networks. And then we have the long short term memory networks. And then there are the gated recurrent units, GRU. Now there is another type of architecture which is known as autoencoder. In the autoencoder, the input and output remain the same. So if you have the yellow and the red are the same thing. So you would ask, like, what is the use of this? So basically the use of this is to find out some kind of latent embeddings, or some kind of non-linear variables out of this data, which you can further use in another model. So autoencoder is a type of unsupervised learning algorithm, and you can use it in the green part as an input to another model. And it has been found that if you use an autoencoder, then as a pre-processing step, then in a lot of cases your accuracy basically improves. Then you can also have something known as variational autoencoder. In variational autoencoder, you have the hidden cell, which is known as the probabilistic hidden cell. So rather than just having one discrete value, you will have the mean and the standard deviation. So that is your variational autoencoder. And then you have other types of neural networks, like Markov chain, Hopfield network, Boltzmann machine. So you can go through. So it depends upon your problem. And so we have seen deep convolution. So deep convolution neural networks, or you can also call them, if the number of layer is greater, hidden layer is greater than one, you can call it as a deep convolution neural network. Then we have the deconvolution neural network, wherein you are basically increasing the size of the image, or you can start from a smaller image and you can reach a higher image. And then you can have DCIGN, and you can so generative adversarial networks are very famous. In generative adversarial networks, you basically have two networks. So you have one which is called as a generator, so in which typically you match the input and output in a pure GAN. So generative adversarial network is also known as GAN. And then you have a discriminator. So discriminator takes the output of a generator, and then it tries to, it's like a sophisticated loss function. And so you have, so support vector machine can also be considered as a type of neural network. Then you have Cohen networks and deep residual networks. So you can see in so basically these are ResNets, so wherein you, instead of just getting the input from the previous layer, uh, so this cell is having the input from the cell which is, or the node which is prior to the previous layer as well, or you can even skip two layers, so that depends on what you're trying to do. So then we have so I was talking about simple algorithms are you should always try first rather than going for complex models. So one is k nearest neighbors algorithm. So k nearest neighbors algorithm is a supervised learning algorithm which is used for doing classification of the data. So if you have this green as category 1, yellow as category 2. Now you have to find out this new data point, whether it belongs to category 1 or category 2. So what typically is done is you would find out the centroid of this category A, centroid of category B. You would find some kind of distance. Maybe you can try Euclidean distance. The centroid with from which it is more near, you can classify it as a part of that category. So this is one of the algorithms for classification, k nearest neighbors. And we have so we have discussed loss functions. And then so we have discussed about images. If you want to input as images, scalars, you can also have time series. So this is an example from natural language processing, but you can also use the time series what we use in our climate science. So the basically the time series, any time series data set has got patterns within the temporal dimension. So you can have a time series as an input and a single target. So in this case, for example, the model is trying to predict the sentiment, whether the sentiment is positive or negative. You can also have a time series as an input and a time series as a target. So then you can compute the loss. The loss will be computed over the entire time series, summed over all the samples. So yeah, then you have, so we have different types of loss functions. So one of them is called the cross entropy loss. I would not go into the details, but cross entropy loss is very useful for if you are having a classification problem. Then there is another paradigm in data science which is called reinforcement learning. So in reinforcement learning, there are different terminologies that you need to be aware of. So there is an environment, there is an agent, there is a reward function. So in reward, so if you basically input some kind of data into your environment will give you a reward and another state to the agent. So environment you can think of as some kind of rules, or maybe the real environment that we have. Now the agent takes the reward can be positive or negative. So the agent takes the state that is given by the environment, and if it is a positive reward, it will learn that. If it is a negative reward, it will learn that also. And then the agent will basically it will feed back to the environment the next action. So the environment will take an action, and then it will give another reward and state. So this is a typical framework of reinforcement learning. And yeah, I think so. I think we should stop here. But okay, so I was at slide number 40. If you guys want, we can continue, but otherwise we can stop. You guys want to continue? I have somewhere around 66 slides for today. Was I only able to do 40? Hello? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You want to continue or you want like the class for today?
Sir, we can continue the slides in the next lectures remaining. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So yeah, we can. Okay, we'll do that. But I would suggest you go to this climate data science repository and you see the syllabus for this course. So this is something that I had prepared. We'll try to follow this, but like and try to cover most of the topics in this given in this syllabus. So these are all the topics that got approved and we thought that we'll cover. And so the 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 people who have taken this course officially, there is no exam, but there would be a term paper. So you would have to do a project and write basically a short paper, a term paper for this course, and we can think about doing presentations for that, and that would be the evaluation for this course. And yeah, you can ask me if you are stuck anywhere. You can start right away, like you can choose your problem of interest and then try to do some algorithms. So I can actively help you guys with it. So yeah, that's all about it. And like I would cover, so these are some basic slides uh, that I wanted to cover. But then we'll move on to this. So there is this practical deep learning course by Yandex Data School. So Yandex is like the Google in Russia, and Yandex is having a lot of very good resources for deep learning. So we'll see all these material, and they also have the collab notebooks for associated uh, with these exercises. So we'll do that. And yeah, let me know if you want to add any specific topics to the course. But yeah, that's all for this class. And let me know if I'm going fast or slow, or you guys are able to. You don't need to understand everything, but thing is, having a basic idea and then working on your problem and understanding what is required for your problem works best in most of the cases. So that's what I have learned works. So yeah, shall we close for today? Oh wait, I have to take attendance. Yeah. I think the desk person can maybe stop the recording. Uh, is anybody there